It had been 212 days since anyone had seen Abigail and Isla Trent. The twins had vanished somewhere between the turquoise waves and the glistening decks of the Ocean Majesty, a mid-sized cruise liner that had left Fort Lauderdale on a 12-day Caribbean itinerary for their mother, Dana Trent. The voyage had been a long-saved-for-gift celebration of the girl's 9th birthday, a chance to spend time together away from the gray routine of inland life. It was supposed to be perfect. Instead, it had become the kind of case that reporters could describe in 3 words that made entire living rooms go silent: the Trent twins. The morning they disappeared, the ship had been docked at Nassau. Dana remembered the details with a clarity that bordered on torture: the smell of sunscreen on their shoulders, the braided pigtails that Isla had insisted on having to match her sister's matching turquoise sundresses she'd bought weeks before. She'd taken them to the ship's buffet just after breakfast rush. The dining area nearly empty. They'd giggled over piles of fruit, trading bites of pineapple and melon as she flipped through the day's shore excursion brochure. Then her phone rang. It had been her boss. Dana was a paralegal, and though she'd warned her firm she'd be out of reach, there was some urgent file matter that only she could clarify. She stepped out to the quieter promenade to take the call. 2 minutes, maybe 3, she told herself at the time. The girls were safe inside. When she returned, their chairs were empty. What followed was a blur. Dana had replayed so many times she could barely tell. Memory from nightmare, the frantic calls for their names, the staff's hurried radio chatter, the tightening in her chest as she scanned every corner of the buffet. Someone said they'd seen the twins walking toward the main pool deck. Another said they'd been with a crew member in a white maintenance shirt. The ship's security footage was spotty. There were wide-open decks with no cameras, crew-only corridors that passengers weren't supposed to enter, and blind spots that could swallow a child in seconds. By nightfall, the ship was under a full internal search. By morning, it was an official missing persons case. By the end of the week, it was international news. And now, 7 months later, Dana was in her apartment in Jacksonville, the case's thick binder open on her coffee table. She'd spent every day since scouring the internet chasing rumors and calling anyone who had ever claimed to have seen 2 identical girls. The police called less often now, so when her phone rang that Thursday afternoon and the caller ID flashed, Detective Colton Reyes, Dana's stomach clenched. She answered with a too fast yes. Reyes's voice was measured, almost cautious. "Miss Trent, I need you to prepare yourself. Something's turned up." Her heart stuttered. "The girls. There's been a discovery." A local fisherman in Harker's Island, North Carolina, found a suitcase washed ashore early this morning. It contained, he paused as if bracing himself, "human remains. We believe they could belong to one of your daughters." Dana felt the room tilt. Her knees gave way and she sank into the couch. No, that's no. "Flying you here tonight," Reyes continued gently, "we'll need you to view the personal effects found inside and provide a formal identification. The remains will be tested for DNA, but there are other items, things you might recognize." Her hands shook so badly, she dropped the phone onto the couch cushion and pressed her palms to her eyes. The suitcase. Even before she saw it, the word itself filled her with a cold, suffocating dread. When she landed in North Carolina that evening, the wind coming off the Sound was raw and biting. Detective Reyes met her at the small regional airport, his brown trench coat snapping in the gusts. He didn't speak much as he drove them toward the sheriff's substation, just occasional careful updates on the evidence's chain of custody. The forensic lab was tucked at the back of the brick building, humming with refrigeration units and the low buzz of fluorescent lights. Dana was handed a mask, gloves, and a disposable gown. The suitcase sat in the center of a stainless steel table. It was medium-sized, once a deep red, but now faded and crusted with salt. The zippers were corroded, the fabric frayed from months in the ocean. A faint stench of brine and something far worse hung in the air. A medical examiner in a pale green apron stepped forward. "Ms. Trent, we've documented everything. Ready? We'll open it now." Dana gripped the edge of the table as the corroded latches clicked open. Inside, she flinched. The remains were wrapped in what looked like a child's hoodie. Pale blue with a peeling graphic of a dolphin. The same hoodie she had bought at the ship's gift shop the morning before they docked in Nassau, next to the remains in a separate evidence bag. It was a plastic hairbrush bright yellow with 3 stickers of cartoon cats still clinging to. The back, her breath hitched. That's Isla's. There was also something else. Something that didn't belong to either of her daughters. A silver cigarette lighter. Tarnished but engraved with the initials RJ. Dana's mind stumbled over it. What is that? We don't know yet, Reyes said, but it could be important. She stared at it, some dim recognition tugging at the back of her mind. The examination room seemed smaller now. The hum of the refrigeration unit suddenly loud in Dana's ears. Detective Reyes set the lighter back in its evidence bag. We'll have our lab lift any prints, though after months in salt water, there's a good chance they've degraded. Dana kept her eyes fixed on the tarnished metal. I've seen that logo before, not the initials, the little etching on the other side. The examiner turned it over. On the reverse was a faint decorative wave pattern. Where? Reyes asked. Dana frowned, dredging through memory. A kiosk on the ship's promenade. They sold souvenirs, small gifts, lighters just like that. I remember because I had to tell Isla not to touch the display. She was fascinated by the tiny flame. Reyes made a note. The ship's sales logs might still exist. If that lighter was purchased on board, we can trace the buyer. 7 months later? Dana asked. If the cruise line hasn't purged their transaction data, yes. And if we can't get the purchase records, we might find surveillance footage. Dana forced herself to look back at the suitcase. What about, she faltered over the word, the body? The medical examiner's voice was clinical but not unkind. There are no obvious signs of sharp force trauma. The bone damage is consistent with long-term submersion and marine activity. Yes. Cause of death will likely have to be determined by exclusion, but he hesitated. There are no injuries consistent with a fall overboard, meaning, Dana thought grimly, this wasn't an accident. By late afternoon, she was walking along the narrow dock at Harker's Island, the wind whipping her hair into her face. Curtis Mayhew, the fisherman who had found the suitcase, was waiting. Beside his boat, I walk this stretch every morning, he told her as they stepped aboard. Tide was just going out when I spotted it looked like luggage, but I could smell it before I even got close. I opened it just enough to see what was inside, then called the sheriff. Did you see anything else? Clothing, debris, anything? Washed up nearby, Dana asked. Curtis shook his head. Just the one case. But I've been fishing these waters all my life. If that case wasn't weighted down, it could have drifted 100 miles before coming ashore. They motored across the sound toward the beach where he'd found it. From the water, the place looked peaceful narrow. Strips of pale sand between thickets of pine, the surf breaking in small, even swells. The site was still taped off a couple of deputies combing the area with metal detectors. Dana crouched beside the depression in the sand where the suitcase had lain, running her fingers through the gritty mix of shells and seaweed. Some part of her had hoped irrationally that there would be something else here. A scrap of fabric, shoe. Something that could tell her where Isla had been before the ocean swallowed her. She stayed in a small inn on the island that night. A deputy posted discreetly outside her door. The wind rattled the old window panes, bringing with it the faint scent of salt and pine resin. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the suitcase on the table. The hoodie. The HAIRBRUSH. Around midnight, she got up and made herself a cup of weak coffee in the tiny kitchenette. Through the thin curtains, she noticed a figure crossing the inn's parking lot, a man in a windbreaker, carrying a small duffel. He set it down beside a dark SUV, then leaned against the hood to light a cigarette. The flicker of the lighter's flame caught her attention. She couldn't see it clearly from this distance. But something about the movement, the way he shielded it from the wind, made her pulse quicken. He looked up, as though sensing he was being watched. Dana let the curtain fall back into place. Her heart THU'd. The next morning, Reyes picked her up early. "You got a hit on that lighter," he said as she slid into the passenger seat. "Not from the cruise line?" A shop in Wilmington, North Carolina, independent newsstand that sells all kinds of odds and ends. The owner remembers selling a batch of those wave-pattern lighters to a man who came in twice last year. Paid cash. Dana's thoughts jumped to the man outside the inn. What did he look like? White male, mid-50s, about 6 feet, short-cropped hair, pale eyes. The owner said he was polite, but off. Couldn't say why. Dana stared. Out at the marshland, sliding past the car window. 7 months. Suitcase, a lighter. And now, maybe the first real thread to pull. The drive to Wilmington took just under 4 hours, much of it along empty stretches of coastal highway where the salt air mingled with the smell of sun-warmed asphalt. Detective Reyes drove in steady silence, occasionally flipping through printed notes on the lighter lead. Dana kept her gaze fixed on the horizon, her thoughts circling the same grim loop. If the lighter came from Wilmington, could Isla have been there? Could someone have kept her alive for months before? Every time her mind edged toward the image of the suitcase, she forced herself back to the present. The newsstand was wedged between a pawn shop and a shuttered diner. Its faded awning listing. In the sea breeze, a bell above the door jingled as they stepped inside. The smell hit first stink, stale tobacco, and the faint tang of something metallic. Behind the counter stood a man in his early 30s. Wiry with a patchy beard and a cautious gaze. Morning, Reyes said, flashing his badge. Detective Colton Reyes, Carteret County Sheriff's Office. We're looking for the owner, Mr. Owen Marlowe? The man nodded toward the back room. That's my uncle. He's out getting supplies, but he'll be back soon. Reyes placed a printed photo of the wave pattern lighter on the counter. We understand you sell these? Recognize it? The man glanced at it briefly. Yeah, we had a box of those last summer. Came from a wholesaler we use for novelty items. Sold most of M2 regulars. One of those regulars, white male, mid-50s, pale eyes. The clerk scratched his jaw. Could be talking about Russell. Comes in maybe once a month. Buys smokes, magazines, sometimes weird stuff from the clearance bin. Paid cash every time. What kind of magazines? Reyes asked. The man hesitated. Old photography mags. Some travel stuff sometimes. The kind I keep under the counter? Dana's skin prickled. Do you know his last name? Dope, but he drives. An old silver pickup, rust along the wheel wells. Always parks across the street, like he doesn't want to be seen here too long. Hey. Owen Marlowe returned 15 minutes later, carrying a cardboard box of newspapers. He was older than Dana expected, maybe late 60s, with a weathered face and nicotine-stained fingers. When Reyes showed him the lighter photo, his expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Yeah, I remember those. And yeah, I know who you mean. Russell Jardine. Comes down from somewhere inland. Doesn't say much, but always leaves with his hands full. Dana's voice was tight. Do you know where we can find him? Exactly. But he mentioned once he was staying at a trailer park outside of Surf City for a while. Might still be there. They drove south, the air growing heavier with the scent of low tide. The trailer park was small and sun-bleached. Most of the units older single-wides with patched skirting and porches cobbled from scrap wood. Lot 12 had an older silver Ford pickup parked out front. The driver's side mirror held on with duct tape. Reyes pulled to the curb. We play this careful. No cause for a search warrant yet, so we knock, talk, and see what we get. Dana's pulse thudded in her ears as they approached. The man who answered was tall, broad-shouldered, his thinning hair cropped close. Pale blue eyes flicked between them, wary. Russell Jardine? Reyes asked. That's me. His voice was low. Even we're following up on a case and need to ask you a few questions about some items you purchased, specifically a lighter. Like this one. Reyes held up the photo. Jardine studied it briefly, then shrugged. Could be mine. I've had a few like that. Where are they now? Reyes asked. Jardine's gaze cooled. Lost one. Left another on a boat months ago. Why? I felt the hairs on her arms lift. Which boat? He looked at her for the first time. Really looked. Fishing charter out of Morehead City. Don't remember the name. Reyes's jaw tightened. Mind if we take a look around your place? Jardine's. Smile didn't reach his eyes. I do mind. Unless you've got a warrant, Detective, I think we're done here. Back in the car, Dana's hands were trembling. He knows something. I could see it in his face. Reyes was already on his phone, calling in a request for surveillance on Lot 12. We'll get a warrant, but we need more probable cause. If he's involved, he's not going anywhere without us knowing. Dana stared out at the weathered trailer, a knot tightening in her gut. Something told her this wasn't the last time she'd see Russell Jardine, and that, when she did, the truth would be worse than anything she was imagining now. The surveillance team moved in before sunrise the next morning. 2 unmarked sedans rotated shifts on the road just outside Lot 12, keeping Jardine's rusting silver pickup in sight. Dana wasn't allowed to be anywhere near it, Reyes had insisted. She remained in Harker's Island until they had something solid, but she called him twice before noon. The first time, he told her Jardine had taken out a trash bag and loaded it into the bed of the truck. The second time, he said Jardine had driven to a marina in Surf City and sat in his vehicle for nearly 40 minutes. Watching the boats could be nothing, Reyes said. Could be him working up the nerve to meet someone. Or to get rid of something, Dana replied. By late afternoon, Reyes called again. His voice had that low, controlled tone that told her something had shifted. We followed him to a storage facility off Highway 17. He went in carrying a duffel, came out empty-handed. He looked lighter, like he'd just unburdened himself. Dana didn't need him to explain the implications. You can get a warrant now. We're working on it, Reyes said. If there's anything in there connected to your daughters, we'll find it. The warrant came through just before midnight. Reyes, a pair of deputies, and a forensic tech entered the narrow metal unit with flashlights cutting through the stale air. Cardboard boxes were stacked along the back wall, their sides marked in thick black marker, tackle, tools. Winter clothes. It was the unmarked plastic bin in the corner that stopped Reyes. Inside, beneath a folded tarp, were 3 items. A child's flip-flop, white with a fading rainbow strap. A waterproof disposable camera, its clear casing scuffed and cloudy, and a small, fabric coin purse patterned with pink seashells. Reyes recognized it instantly. Dana had described Illa's treasure purse in one of her earliest statements. She'd said it was the one thing her daughter had insisted on carrying everywhere. On the cruise the next morning, Reyes called Dana to the station. When she saw the purse through the evidence bag, her knees nearly gave way. "That's hers," she said, voice shaking. She kept foreign coins in its souvenirs from places she'd never been. The tech had already emptied it. Inside were 2 euro coins, a key with no identifying markings, and a crumpled scrap of paper with a string of numbers written in shaky blue ink. Dana stared at the numbers. "What is that?" "Looks like coordinates," Reyes said. "Somewhere offshore. We'll run them." The location turned out to be a stretch of open water about 30 miles east of Cape. Look out far enough that no ferry or tour boat passed regularly, but within range of a small fishing vessel. "Could be where he dropped the suitcase," Reyes said, "or something else." Dana's mind jumped to the possibility she hadn't dared say aloud, or where he kept her alive. 2 days later, Reyes arranged for a marine search team to investigate the coordinates. Dana wasn't supposed to be there, but she convinced him to let her stand on the dock as the boats returned. The divers surfaced, one by one, each shaking their head, till the last one climbed aboard holding a small, corroded tin box. It was sealed with a strip of rusted wire. Back at the station, the techs cut it open. Inside, wrapped in layers of oilcloth, were photographs, dozens of them, curled and water-stained, but still clear enough to make Dana's breath catch. Some were of her twins on the cruise ship, taken from a distance. Others were in unfamiliar settings. A dim room with wood-paneled walls. A narrow bed with a faded quilt in the background of one. Dana spotted something, a reflection in a wall mirror. A man holding the camera. Russell Jardine. The photographs lay in a grim array on the evidence table, each one in its own clear sleeve. Dana had forced herself to look at all of them. Even when the edges of her vision began to dim, most showed her daughters in candid moments sitting, cross-legged on a bed, eating from paper plates, their eyes glassy as if caught mid-blink. In some, they were smiling in that automatic way children do when a camera appears, though Dana could see the stiffness beneath it. But two details lodged in her mind and refused to let go. The first was the reflection Roussel Jardine's unmistakable face in the warped mirror glass. The second was the quilt on the bed, pale yellow squares bordered by faded blue stitching. She'd seen it before, not in her own life, but in a photograph from the case files Reyes had let her glance through weeks ago, evidence from another missing child case out of coastal South Carolina 3 years earlier. That quilt had been in the background then too, Reyes, she said, pointing to the photograph. That blanket tit's the same as in the Caroline Holt case. He leaned over her shoulder, eyes narrowing. If you're right, that's a big connection. Caroline was never found, and her case went cold, Dana said quietly. Until now, Reyes replied. They pulled Caroline's file from storage. The parallels were stark. A young girl vanishing from a marina-side campground. No sign of forced entry to the family's RV, and a handful of vague witness statements about a quiet older man seen nearby in the days before she disappeared. There had been no suspects at the time. Now, they had a face, a name, and a link. The district attorney approved an arrest warrant by late afternoon, but Jardine wasn't at Lot 12 when the deputies arrived. His truck was gone, the trailer's door swinging on its hinge as if left in haste. Inside, dishes still sat in the sink, a half-finished beer on the counter. He knew, Reyes muttered. Someone tipped him off or he saw our surveillance. Put out a Bull B on the lookout for the silver Ford. Plate numbers already in every patrol car from the state line to Wilmington. Dana spent the night at the Harker's Island Inn again, staring out at the dark water. Every sound outside made her sit up, heart racing. At 2:17 a.m., her phone lit up. Reyes's voice was tight. We've got a lead. He stopped for gas outside New Bern. Store clerk says he headed west on Highway 70 alone, removing units to intercept. By sunrise, Jardine's truck had been spotted near a bridge crossing into a stretch of low, swampy marshland. Units closed in, but he didn't stop. He pushed the truck faster. Weaving between early morning commuters, Reyes was on the radio, his voice sharp with commands. Do not box him in near the bridge. Wait for the marshland cutoff. Dana, against her better judgment, had insisted on riding with him. She could feel the tension vibrating in the air. It's the kind that meant everything could go wrong in a heartbeat. Then, just as they crested the rise before the bridge, she saw it. Jardine's truck swerving, tires skidding on the damp pavement, and plunging nose first into the guardrail. The front end hung over the edge. Reyes slammed the car into park, running toward the vehicle with his weapon drawn. Jardine, step out. But Jardine wasn't climbing out. He was reaching for something. In the passenger seat, Reyes didn't hesitate. He yanked the door open, dragged the man out, cuffed him against the side of the truck, while another deputy secured the interior. Dana caught a glimpse of what he'd been reaching for. A waterproof duffel bag. Inside, the bag contained clothes, cash, several disposable cell phones, and most chilling of Ula's small pink hoodie with a dolphin graphic. It matched the one that had been wrapped around the remains in the suitcase. Dana's voice was barely a whisper. He kept the other. One. Reyes looked grim. We've got him, Dana. Now we make him talk. The interrogation room was deliberately plain for walls the color of old paper, a metal table, 2 chairs. Jardine sat slouched in one of them, his wrists cuffed to a steel loop. Dana wasn't allowed inside, but Reyes had promised she could. Watch from the adjoining observation room. Through the one-way glass, she studied Jardine's posture. The way he avoided looking directly at anyone. How he seemed entirely at ease despite the shackles. 2 deputies stood at the door. Reyes sat. Opposite him, a folder open. Photographs from the tin box arranged on the table. Russell, Reyes began, his voice steady. We have you linked to the disappearance of Abigail and Isla Trent. We have physical evidence from your storage unit, photographs you took, and eyewitness accounts placing you near other missing child cases. You need to start talking. Jardine's Pale eyes drifted to the photo of the twins on the bed. Faint smile touched his mouth. Pretty girl's polite. Dana's nails dug into her palms. Where did you take them after the cruise? Reyes pressed. Jardine shrugged. Different places. Didn't like the first one. Too cold. Illa's body was found in a suitcase, Reyes said. Tell me what happened. Jardine leaned back, chains rattling. She got sick, fever. Couldn't keep food down. I didn't have the right medicine. She didn't make it through the night. Dana whispered to the glass. Liar. Reyes didn't blink. So you put her in a suitcase and dumped her in the ocean? Jardine's gaze hardened. Better than burying her in the woods like a stray dog. Reyes shifted tactics. Abigail, where is she? For the first time, Jardine's expression flickered something quick and guarded. She's not my problem anymore, he said. Someone else has her. Dana's breath caught. Who? Reyes's voice was sharp. You. Think I'm stupid? If I tell you, I lose my leverage. You've got me on plenty already. But her, she's worth something to people, to the right people. Where? Reyes demanded. Jardine only smirked. You'll have to figure that out yourself, DA. Wanted him charged immediately, but Reyes argued to hold him a little longer every hour they kept. Jardine in that room was another chance to break him. Dana was waiting in the hallway when he stepped out. He said Abigail's alive. Do you believe him? Reyes exhaled slowly. I think he's telling the truth about her being with someone else, but that doesn't mean she's safe. Then we go after her now, Dana said. We don't. Stop. Reyes nodded. We won't. 2 hours later, a search of Jardine's truck uncovered a slip of paper wedged deep in the glove compartment. On it was a single word, Marlowe, and a phone number with a Wilmington area code. Marlowe, Dana repeated, when Reyes told her. Same last name as the newsstand owner who sold him the lighter, Reyes said grimly. Looks like your hunch about that place wasn't just coincidence. That night, while Jardine sat in his cell, Reyes and a small tactical team headed for Wilmington. Dana stayed behind at the station, the clock dragging toward midnight, when the call finally came. It wasn't what she expected. Reyes's voice was low, urgent. We found a property tied to Owen. Marlowe on the edge of town. There's a locked shed out back. Dana, we heard movement inside. The Wilmington night air was thick with humidity, carrying the faint temps of the nearby Cape Fear River. Reyes stood with 3 tactical officers near. The back of Owen Marlowe's weathered clapboard house. A narrow dirt path led to the shed. Squat, windowless structure with corrugated metal sides, its padlock glinting in the sweep of a flashlight. On my go, Reyes murmured. The bolt cutter snapped through the lock with a metallic pop. One officer swung the door open, weapon ready. A beam of light cut into the darkness inside. For a moment there was no movement. Then a sound, small, hesitant, like the scrape of bare feet on plywood. Abigail, Reyes called gently. A thin figure emerged from the shadows, shielding her eyes from the light. She was barefoot, her hair cut unevenly, wearing a men's t-shirt that hung almost to her knees. Her face was gaunt, but the shape of it, the slope of her nose, the set of her mouth was unmistakable. It was Abigail Trent. She didn't run too. Them, not at first. She stood frozen, eyes darting between the officers, as though unsure if this was rescue or another trick. Reyes holstered his weapon, crouched slightly to meet her gaze. You're safe now, sweetheart. Your mom's been looking for you every single day. Her lips trembled. Where's Isla? What? Reyes swallowed hard. We'll talk about that later. Let's get you out of here first. When he stepped forward, she flinched, then seemed to decide in an instant. She crossed the distance and clung to his sleeve. The interior of the shed was sparse. A cot with a thin mattress, a plastic bin of clothes, and a bucket in the corner. No windows, no decorations. The air smelled of dust and damp plywood. One of the officers moved to clear the space, photographing everything. Another took a bag from the corner, a small, worn backpack that looked out of place among the other items. Inside were a spiral notebook, a handful of crayons, and a folded cruise itinerary from the Ocean Majesty by the time they got Abigail to the station. It was nearly 3 a.m. Dana had been pacing the hallway outside the bullpen for hours when Reyes appeared in the doorway, a girl at his side. For a heartbeat, Dana thought her knees might give way. "Abby," her voice broke. She crossed the room in 3 strides, falling to her knees to gather her daughter into her arms. Abigail's body was light, too light, but solid and warm. Dana could feel her daughter's small hands knotting into the fabric of her shirt. "I knew you'd find me," Abigail whispered into her shoulder. Later, in a quiet room with a social worker and a nurse, Abigail told the first slivers of her story. How Jardine had taken them from the ship, how Isla had gone away one night, how she'd been passed to Mr. Owen a few weeks later. "He said I couldn't go outside because people were looking for me," Abigail said softly. "Sometimes he left me in the shed for days. He brought food, but he always locked the door again." "Did you ever see anyone else?" the social worker asked. Abigail hesitated, glancing toward the corner of the room. "A man with glasses. He came once at night. They argued about money." Dana's pulse quickened. "Do you remember his name?" She shook her head. "But he had a tattoo here." She pointed to her forearm. It was a wave, like the one on the lighter. Reyes stepped into the room just then, his expression grim. "We've got Owen Marlowe in custody. It's not saying much, but with Abby's statement, we can charge him. And now we've got another man to find, the one with the wave tattoo." Dana held her daughter tighter, the relief of the reunion shadowed by a new, gnawing fear. Whoever the man with the tattoo was, he was still out there, and he knew Abigail could identify him. Abigail slept in a secured room at the station that night, curled beneath a blanket Dana had brought from home. Reyes insisted on keeping her there until they could be sure the man with the wave tattoo wasn't in the area. By mid-morning, based on Abigail's description, were circulating through every law enforcement agency in the state. The man was tall, lean, with wire-rimmed glasses and the curling outline of a wave tattooed on his left forearm. Dana saw the sketch on the corner of Reyes's desk and felt a chill. "That wave, it's the same as on the lighter." "Exactly the same," Reyes nodded. "It's not a coincidence. I think the tattoo and the lighter design might be tied to a group. Could be how they identify each other, a group." Dana's voice was tight. "How many people are we talking about?" "You don't know yet," Reyes admitted. "But it's not just Jardine and Marlowe. Abby's description of the man with glasses, he's organized. He came to check on her, not to harm her immediately. That means she was being held for something." Dana's stomach turned. "Sold." Reyes didn't answer, which was answer enough. The break came from a gas station security camera outside of Jacksonville. 2 days before Jardine's arrest, a man matching the sketch had stopped there, buying bottled water and fuel. The footage showed the wave tattoo clearly when he handed over cash. Better still, he wasn't alone. In the passenger seat of his van sat a teenage boy, pale, thin, staring straight ahead. "Another victim," Reyes said. "Oh, we need to move fast." The plates on the van came back to a rental in Raleigh under the name Harold Klein, a likely alias. The rental agency said it was due to be returned in 3 days, which means Reyes said we can catch him in one of 2 places, wherever. He's keeping that boy. Or when he tries to hand the van back. Dana couldn't stay still, and we find where he's keeping him now. If he has Abby's face in his head, he's not going to wait long to move. That afternoon, Abigail woke long enough to answer a few more questions. She remembered hearing the man with glasses talking on the phone. He mentioned the old marina and the deep dock. Reyes pulled a chart of the coastline. There's an abandoned marina south of Sneed's Ferry. Locals call it the deep dock because the water's good for bigger boats. It's been closed for years. It was enough for a judge to sign off on a search warrant. The tactical team rolled, and just after sunset, moving silently past the rotting pilings and empty slipways. The main building's windows were boarded, but light leaked from the gaps. Inside, they found the boy from the gas station footage alive, though malnourished. In a plastic chair, wrists bound. There was no sign of the man with glasses in the office at the back of the building. However, they found something else. a waterproof case containing passports, rolls of cash, and a folder labeled with dates and names. Dana's eyes caught on. One name written in block letters, Abigail Trent, hold until clearance. The folder's pages were damp at the edges, the ink slightly blurred, but the contents were chillingly organized. Each page listed a name, approximate age, a few physical details, and a code number. Next to each entry were handwritten note dates, cryptic abbreviations, and, in some cases, a single word, cleared. Some of the names were crossed out. Abigail's page was near the back. Beside her details was the phrase, hold until clearance, C5. Reyes had no doubt C stood for clearance. But the number was still a mystery. This isn't random, Reyes said, flipping through the pages. They're cataloging victims like inventory.
Ow.
Dana's stomach churned. Whoa. Dana's stomach churned. And if cleared means what I think it does. Reyes didn't let her finish. We've got enough here to put half a dozen agencies on this. But the man with the tattoo, he's the key. If we find him, we find out who's running this. Boy rescued from the marina was 17. His name Ethan. Once he was safe and given water, he whispered about the man with glasses. He called himself Mr. R, said he worked for people who paid him to collect. Collect what? Reyes asked. Ethan's eyes shifted to Dana, then back to the floor. Kids. Always kids. Where did he take you before here? Ethan thought. For a moment, a house smelled like fish. I could hear waves all the time, and boats, big ones, not little fishing ones. That detail narrowed the search to waterfront properties capable of docking large vessels. By noon the next day, analysts had a short list of 5 locations within a 60-mile radius. Then a tip came in from a deputy in Hampstead. Van matching the rental description had been seen at a private dock near an old cannery, one of the addresses. On the list, the raid team moved in under cover of darkness. Dana wasn't supposed to be anywhere near it, but she stayed close to the van, listening as radio chatter filled the air. Visual on target. Copy. Holding until a sudden burst of static. Then, he's running. Dana's grip tightened on the edge of the van. Through the gaps between the buildings, she saw flashlights bouncing, shadows moving fast, toward the dock. The slap of shoes on wood echoed across the water, then dash splash. He's in the water. A voice crackled over the radio. The man with glasses tried to swim for the far side of the inlet, but 2 Marine unit officers cut him off. Dragged back to shore, he coughed and spat brackish water, his glasses gone. The wave tattoo slick with river slime. When they sat him in the interrogation room later, he stared at the wall, silent, until Reyes slid Abigail's photo across the table. You were holding her for someone, Reyes said. Who? The man's lips twitched into a thin smile. You think you stopped something? You didn't. She was one name on a list that never ends. In the van back to the station, Reyes didn't say much. Dana sat beside him, staring at the dark highway ahead. You think he's telling the truth? She asked finally. Reyes's jaw was tight. I think there's more out there. They know we're coming. The days that followed felt like a blur, the kind where time lost all shape. Federal agents swarmed into the coastal towns, combing through records, dock logs, and property deeds linked to the cannery raid. Every clue from the folder, every page of names, was treated like a live wire. Dana stayed close to Abigail, refusing to let her daughter out of her sight. But she couldn't avoid the questions, the ones Abigail sometimes asked in a whisper, as if afraid to hear the answer. Is Isla really gone? Dana never lied to her. Yes, sweetheart. She's gone, but I found you. I'm never letting you go again. The man with the wave tattoo, real name, Richard Colby, eventually broke under pressure from federal prosecutors. His cooperation wasn't kindness. It was bargaining for fewer years behind bars. He named names. What came out was worse than any of them had imagined, a trafficking network operating under the guise of shipping cooperatives, using legitimate cargo vessels to smuggle children out of the country. Jardine, Marlowe, and Colby were small parts of a larger system, collectors and holders. Abigail's hold until clearance, C5 notation meant. She was waiting for a vessel scheduled 5 days from the date the folder was written. If the raid on Marlowe's shed had happened even a week later, she would have been gone. The investigation sprawled into other states, even across borders. Dana followed the news as one arrest after another came in: dock workers, truck drivers, even a marina owner who'd once been interviewed on the local news about keeping the waterfront safe. Ilse's suitcase, retrieved months earlier, was now undeniable evidence of the network's brutality. Dana attended the court hearings for Jardine, Marlowe, and Colby, sitting in the front row, never looking away as the charges were read. But closure was a complicated thing. There were nights when Dana woke to find Abigail standing in her doorway, silent, eyes wide. There were moments when a sudden sound, a creak in the house. The thud of a car door outside would send both of them into a frozen hush. Healing would not be quick. It might never be complete. One afternoon, months later, Dana and Abigail stood on the shore near Cape Lookout, the sea breeze tugging at their hair. Abigail bent to place something in the sand, a small pink seashell purse. Dana recognized it instantly, the one from Jardine's storage unit. Abigail had asked to keep it, saying it made her feel like Isla was close. She loved the ocean. "Shh," Abigail said softly. Dana put an arm around her shoulders. "She's part of it now." They stood there until the tide came in, the waves lapping over the purse before pulling it gently out to sea. The case files would remain in federal hands for years, as the network's final threads were untangled. But for Dana, the investigation had shifted from evidence to endurance. She had lost one daughter to the water and nearly lost the other to the shadows behind it. Now, every sunrise over the Atlantic felt like defiance, a reminder to the men who had taken so much that she was still here, still watching, still ready to fight. And in the quiet moments, when the wind carried the scent of salt and the low rumble of distant waves, she swore she could hear Isla's laughter, light and fleeting, but enough to carry her through another day.